Good evening and welcome to the April 9th Bloomington Planning Commission meeting. The Planning Commission advises the City Council on development proposals, development standards, long-range planning, and transportation issues. Some items the Planning Commission has final authority for, and others the City Council will make the final decision. The Planning Commission is made up of 7 volunteers that are appointed by the City Council to serve for up to 3 years at a time. Tonight, we have 6 items on our agenda. But before we begin, we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. As you can see, things look a little bit different in the council chambers tonight. In response to the pandemic that is facing the United States right now, we have changed the operations in which we're taking place, but we still fully intend and are trying to serve the public in the best way possible. And tonight, with a short synopsis of how things will work, Mr. Markergaard, would you outline that?
Sure, Mr. Chair, members of the public. So in Bloomington, given the pandemic situation, the advisory commission meetings have all been canceled through April 15th, but there's an exception if time-sensitive action must be taken. And we did confer with our applicants this evening and concluded that we do have time-sensitive items on the agenda. So that's why we're moving forward with tonight's meeting. Luckily, there's a statute that addresses, state statute that addresses meetings during a pandemic situation. Somebody had some forethought there. And that statute says that under a health pandemic or an emergency, public meetings may be conducted by telephone or other electronic means. So that's what we're doing tonight is everybody pretty much is remote except for Commissioner Solberg and myself. And we also have somebody in communication staff in the control room. So we only have 3 people here at City Hall in the council chambers. Joining remotely are planning commissioners, staff, applicants, and members of the public. I would note that because we have a remote meeting, that all of the votes must be conducted by roll call. In terms of communicating this unusual meeting type, we did send an e-subscribe out last Friday. When the packet came out, it was sent to over 1,900 subscribers. And then we also posted the information on our website and communicated it with anybody that's communicated with us on the items on tonight. Communication explained how to participate remotely. And that could be either watching the meeting online or on cable television or participating via computer or phone. It also explained where to find the agenda in the packet online and where to send public comments via email. And we did receive several comments via email that we've provided to the planning commissioners and we'll talk more about. If you are watching live tonight and would like to testify, you can call the number on the screen, which is 952-563-8926, or you can email planning@bloomingtonmn.gov for instructions, and we'll be able to get you on the WebEx call so you can provide live testimony if you would like to do so. We'll have that information scrolling across the screen tonight. If you are watching via cable television or if you're watching via the online feed, which comes from the cable television feed. However, if you're watching via YouTube Live, that scrolling feature does not work. And it will also not work if you're watching when you're not live. After the fact on replay, it will not show up. So just look for the scrolling information if you'd like to participate live in the meeting. We have heard from one member of the public that wants to participate live, and I see that He has joined, so we'll be able to hear from him on item number 1. And then we also received 5 comments via email as well. So that's all I have as terms of a summary.
All right, thank you, Mr. Markegard. Before we start, I think it's probably appropriate to do a roll call. Make sure, again, all the commissioners, planning commission members can hear us and we can hear them. So I'll start with Commissioner Bennett. Can you respond, please?
Here.
Commissioner Goodrum,
Here.
Commissioner Goldsman,
Here.
Commissioner Corman, Commissioner Corman,
Let me unmute. There we go.
I'm here.
oh, okay, there we go. Commissioner Roman,
Here.
and Commissioner Albrecht.
Here.
All right, so we got all the commissioners here. And so with that, I think we can go to our first item, which is a plat. Can we have the staff report, please?
Certainly. Good evening, commissioners. This is Mike Cincinnati, one of the planners. When I have the ability to share my screen, I'll go ahead and do that.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, Mike. I'm working on transferring that control to you. I think I have to stop sharing mine first.
And I just ask the public to bear with us as we're trying to learn new electronic means and keep everything going during high peak time of internet usage right now. So thank you.
All right, Mike, you should have it now.
Okay, great. Everyone see the first slide of the presentation?
Yes, we
Yes.
can see it.
Okay, great. So the first item on tonight's agenda is for a preliminary and final plat, more specifically a type 3 a preliminary and final plat to subdivide an existing lot into 3 lots. The address is 2915 Overlook Drive. This is an aerial image of the property outlined in red dash line. Of the Overlook Drive.
Hey, Mike, we lost your audio.
Z.
What about now? Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Now we can.
we lost you right away at the beginning when you turned
Okay.
to that second slide.
Okay. Let me know if you lose me again.
You're good.
So moving on to a little more detailed view of the property. This image is zoomed into the property 8915 Overlook Drive. So the area that we're really focusing on is the area near Overlook Drive itself. Existing home is set back pretty substantially from the street itself, and the applicants are looking to subdivide the property to allow residential development near Overlook Drive itself. I turned on the contours or the elevations on this drawing or on this image. So you can see the area in front of the existing house is quite flat, but behind the home is really where there's a lot of slope. And this lot is very much a bluff lot, and the land behind the home is not developable, but the area in front of the home is where the applicant is looking to develop. I have a couple of images of some existing conditions. So this is looking east or southeast from Overlook Drive. As you can see, the area, the Overlook Drive itself is on the lower left-hand side of the image. We can see the area that is vacant of any buildings or doesn't have any buildings on it along the street itself. We note that a lot of mature trees on the site, and that's a characteristic of the entire neighborhood. I think this particular home on this property was built in 1968, I believe, and a lot of the homes in this neighborhood are about that same age. So we're certainly talking about an established neighborhood. This is the existing home as it sits a couple days ago, but the applicant has been doing quite a bit of renovations to the home and is proposing to retain this home. And I'll provide some more detail on how they would accomplish retaining the existing home and providing access to that property while creating new property along, or new developable lots along Overlook Drive. So this is the final plat itself, the document that would get recorded to create new residential lots. This is the entire plat, so you can see just the scope of this piece of land. It's quite large, but the lots that we're focusing on today are near Overlook Drive, and you can see lot 1 and 2, but I'll zoom in here. These are the two lots that are being proposed, or new lots that are being proposed. And so the existing home would occupy the southern lot, whereas the new residential lots are shown here as lots 1 and 2. So for code requirements, there's quite a few code requirements that we have to review when thinking about residential plats. And so we did an analysis of these code requirements, including site area. The minimum is 11,000 square feet. I have the proposed lots, so lot 1, 2, and 3. Lot 3, of course, is quite large because that's the remainder of the lot with the existing home. So it does meet the lot area requirements. Lot width, the code minimum for lot width is only 80 feet, but we do have something called median lot width, which tries to blend new residential lots within an existing neighborhood. So we do a calculation, and the median lot width, or the minimum lot width for this, is 80% of the median lot width within 500 feet. So doing that calculation, the code requirement is 97 feet. So 17 feet larger, or wider, if you will, than the code minimum. The proposed exceeds that, so that's also compliant. I'll provide a little more detail in terms of the building setbacks, but we have something called prevailing setbacks, which again tries to blend new buildings or new homes within established neighborhoods where we average adjacent properties, but the maximum enforceable setback is 65 feet. In this case, the setback is 65 feet. So a couple additional items: building setback along Overlook Circle, which is to the east, and that would serve or apply to the existing home that is also compliant, as well as rear setbacks. One thing we don't know wouldn't know until a building permit is submitted is what the lot coverage or impervious surface coverage is for a particular property. And that's something that we would review as part of like a certificate of survey. When someone applies for a building permit for a new home, for example, they provide a certificate of survey that shows the footprint of the home, the grading of the lot, where a lot of the characteristics of the building are, but then it would also provide some detail on what the impervious surface coverage is. And at that time, we would review to make sure that it's within the standard for lot coverage. So going on to the preliminary plat. So the preliminary plat is much more detailed. It has contours or topography, a lot of other existing conditions type information that is not included on the final plat. And one thing that the applicant would like to do ultimately is to have to construct a single family home, but then also construct a 2-family two-family dwelling. So they would like to ultimately develop 3 new residential lots, and that's depicted on the preliminary plat. So again, zooming in on the lot 1 to the east, they would like to develop a two-family dwelling, and on the west, lot 2, a single-family home. It's important to note that we're not asking the Planning Commission to make a recommendation on a two-family dwelling. The applicant has been transparent that that's what they'd like to do ultimately. But what's before you today is really a 3-lot plat to create 2 new residential lots. Should this plat be approved, the applicant would then have the ability to go through an additional review process to have a two-family building approved. I want to make sure that's clear. Now, we have had, like Glenn Markegard, the planning manager, mentioned, some feedback from members of the public. And I think there's at least one individual who would like to provide some testimony to you. And they expressed some concerns with additional residential development in an area that is quite established. And one, if I can make a generalization, I think there was some concern about the duplex that's being, or the two-family dwelling that would ultimately be built should it be approved. And so that was one of the significant concerns, that some neighbors would rather see only single-family homes. But I'll address some of the code requirements that we have to review relative to the two-family dwelling in a moment. I understand there's a lot of text on the slide, but I think it's important given the concern that we heard from members of the public related to a two-family dwelling. And one of the pieces of concern related to a two-family dwelling was the increased density and how that increased density could change the character of this neighborhood. And the code actually deals with that quite specifically. And we have a number of performance standards related to two-family dwellings. But even starting in the purpose section of the two-family dwellings performance standards is that it's intended to accommodate two-family dwellings within predominantly single-family areas. So the intent of the code, or the explicit purpose, is to try and allow some two-family dwellings within predominantly single-family neighborhoods, provided that they meet the performance standards that we have from the city code. And I've included a few of those here under C1, R1 zoning. This is the zoning here is R1. The site size, the minimum site size for a two-family dwelling is 15,000. The proposed is just under 20,000, so that standard is met. As well as the site width for a two-family dwelling is 100 feet. And in this case, they're proposing a little over 120 feet. So those are just a few items that we look for in reviewing two-family dwellings. Again, we're not asking the Planning Commission to take action on a two-family dwelling, but the feedback we heard from the public, given the concern, we wanted to at least address in some form those standards. Going back to the preliminary plat, the graphic here, you see the red line on the east part of the existing homes property. One unique feature about this lot is that Overlook Circle actually extends to this lot's boundary. And so that's how the applicant is able to propose a new driveway to Overlook Circle and not have access directly from Overlook Drive. You can see on this drawing how the existing driveway would be removed to make way for the new single-family home. This is an image, a photo from Overlook Circle, and you can see the house, which is darker in color in the background, and you see a small shed as well as the existing detached garage. The fact that this property is adjacent to public right-of-way allows there to be an access onto Overlook Circle. One thing to note is the shed as well as the garage would have to be removed or relocated because essentially the image here would become the front yard for this property, and detached accessory buildings are not permitted between the home, the face of the home, and the front yard. So those elements would have to be relocated. I'll touch on prevailing setback briefly. So this is the image within city code. And again, for home new development or additions to homes even, in established neighborhoods, you have to average the setback of adjacent properties. In this case, we exclude corner lots. The lot to the east is a corner lot, so we don't count that. And the lot to the west is the setback there is over 200 feet. In order to create an average, we essentially take the code minimum, 30 feet, and then average it with 205 feet. So to do a little basic math, the prevailing setback for this property is 117.5 feet. However, the code has a maximum enforceable setback of 65. So because of that, the setback here is 65 feet. Moving on to tree preservation, this plat that would impact trees or remove trees is subject to, or any single family development is subject to tree preservation standards. And that certainly applies here. However, the code does allow a fair amount of removals. The threshold is 50% of significant trees is a threshold before there has to be a reforestation plan. And based on the tree plan that was submitted by the applicant, they would not exceed that threshold. The tree plan is something that we think could evolve because they don't have final designs on the homes that would be built. And so if a home is relocated in a certain way, that might cause the removal of a tree that they didn't anticipate. So that's something that we would think might evolve a little bit. Nonetheless, the tree plan as initially proposed as part of the application would remove, 30% of the significant trees on the site, whereas the threshold is 50%. So they're within the threshold. Now for single family neighborhoods, or really any development along public rights of way, we want there to be sidewalk. And for new commercial development, that often means rebuilding sidewalk if there is substandard sidewalk, or widening it. And the same is actually the case for single family neighborhoods, but there are some exceptions. And one of the exceptions is allows the city council to waive a sidewalk requirement in certain instances. And one of those is common instances where there is no sidewalk network in the existing neighborhood. And that's the case in this particular location. On this image, you see the fence. That's roughly where the property boundary is. And that's where a sidewalk would go. So the next image is essentially the red line on this graphic would be where the sidewalk would be located. And we're supportive of the city council waiving the sidewalk requirement for several reasons. One is there isn't a sidewalk network within this neighborhood. The nearest sidewalk is on Xerxes to the west, north-south street, and I'm not aware. I don't believe there's any sidewalk elsewhere in the entire neighborhood. Second, Overlook Drive, at least this section of Overlook Drive, is intended to be reconstructed in 2020. And while the road would be reconstructed, a sidewalk would not be included. So in the foreseeable future, over several decades, the city would not be engaged in constructing sidewalk along Overlook Drive. So we feel that having a small section of sidewalk in isolation doesn't represent the public's best interest. So we are recommending approval. We do believe that this is a code complying preliminary and final plat. We recognize the concern from neighbors regarding increased density. However, given the code requirements that we have, we feel that that would be acceptable, provided those performance standards are met. So I do have two recommended motions for you on the screen, and I'm happy to answer questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Centenario. I just a couple of questions before I open it to the other commissioners. One, just the process for reviewing the dual or the twin homes, is that a administrative function, or is that a formal planning commission type process?
Good. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The two-family dwelling process, and I'll go to an extra slide that I had. And this is taken directly from the code dealing with two-family dwelling review processes. And it requires final site and building plan approval. But then I've highlighted how the review processes with the planning manager, in other words, the planning manager has the ability to approve two-family dwellings. So there's a very prescriptive set of performance standards in the city code that we review when we have a two-family dwelling application. But provided that it's code complying, the planning manager has the ultimate approval authority. Following that review and approval, the applicant, whoever it may be, can apply for a building permit.
Okay, thank you. And then the second question I had was just a little bit about the calculation, the median setback. And is that just on one side of the road that's calculated, or is it calculated on both sides of the road?
Mr. Chair, it's on one side of the road, the side of the road of the subject property. So in this case, it'd be the south side.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Are there, Commissioner Roman, it looks like you have a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Centenario, following on Commissioner Solberg's question, and I apologize that I should have perhaps given you a heads up on this, but it didn't come to me in time. Do we know what the prevailing setback is on the other side of the Overlook Drive?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner, don't know the exact setback or prevailing setback. It's not the homes on the north side of the street aren't. They don't have the same level of setback. Like, for example, the property to the west has a 200+ foot setback. I'm not aware of any properties on the north side of the street that have that significant setback, primarily because they're not as large. Typically, the lots are not as large, and they're not on the bluff. So the bluff lots on the south have tend to be much larger, not universally, but a lot of the properties are much larger and they extend all the way down the bluff. And so a number of the homes have those really large setbacks, like the 150 to 200 foot setbacks.
Thank you.
Commissioner Goldsman, you have a question? No? All right. Commissioner Bennett, do you have a question?
Regarding the setback, regardless of what the other prevailing setbacks are, this is already at the maximum setback under the code, right?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner, I've heard part of the question, but I think.
Oh.
Can you repeat it, Commissioner Bennett?
Yes. So can you hear me all right now? I guess.
Yes.
First, okay. So just to clarify, regardless of what the other prevailing setbacks are, either across the street or around it, this is already at the maximum allowed by code, though, right? The 65 is the maximum that can be required. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, Madam Commissioner, that's correct. So the 65-foot maximum was essentially designed for a scenario where you have really large setbacks, and which in some cases can make it impossible to do any sort of building addition or new construction without a variance. And so while we want to acknowledge and respect greater than minimum setbacks, the city wants to have a maximum requirement. And the number that ultimately was chosen is 65 feet, which is more than twice the minimum, the city code minimum, which is 30 feet. So it's essentially trying to find a balance between what the code minimum is, 30 feet, while trying to respect the character of neighborhoods that might have larger setbacks.
Thank you.
Are there any additional questions for staff from the commissioners?
Yes, Chair, this is Commissioner Goodrum. I have one question for staff.
Go ahead.
I thought my hand was up, but questions regarding drainage alterations with the looks to be a 2 to 3 foot drop from Overlook Circle from the property. Now, when we cut that driveway into the circle, are we going to have changes or drainage alterations from the existing site to the new development with that driveway cut through? And would there be any impacts to the neighborhood?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner, certainly there would probably be some modest increases in drainage to the circle itself. I think our engineering division, as they review any sort of driveway permit, would need to make sure that the grade is acceptable for the improvements on that cul-de-sac. In their review, they didn't find it to be potentially have an adverse impact on the existing improvements, however.
Okay, thank you.
And Commissioner Goodrum, you did have your hand up. I just am getting used to everybody's names and it was cut off, so I apologize for that. Anybody else with any other commissioners have questions for staff? Okay, seeing none. At this point, we will go to the applicant. Is the applicant online, Mr. Markegard?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I noticed Steve Furlong is online. Mr. Furlong, I am going to unmute you, and you may have other people on your team. If you want to just let me know, I can promote them to as well to panelists.
Thank you, Glenn. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yes.
Yep.
Great. Good evening, commissioners. Is Andrew Dibble also available to speak? Is he showing up there?
So I see 2 call-in users. I will promote both of them, and we'll to panelists, and we'll see. It won't let me promote either to panelists.
Okay, I have the owner, Andrew Dibble, on instant message here, so if he has anything to add. I'm just acting as a developer here. Just a few comments. The owner and I conducted a neighborhood meeting last fall, and at that time we had proposed two family dwellings, and the preconceived notion from the neighborhood was that it was to be an affordable housing development, and we didn't hear any concerns about density at that time. Because of city code and inability to do two family dwellings here, we have changed to this plan of a single family and a 2-family dwelling. Just to clarify that, there are no plans here for affordable housing. All the development will be market rate, and it will conform to the overall appeal and design of the neighborhood. We're not planning any 6,000 or 7,000 square foot McMansions here. The exterior design and appeal from the street should conform to the rest of the street. And we'll adhere to all building code, city ordinances on heights, impervious surface areas, required landscaping, tree preservation, etc. And just to close, to borrow from Mayor Busey, development in the city needs to be a surgical one as we're completely built out and as a community in need of additional housing options. This is one way of providing additional options for our current and new prospective residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else from your group, Mr. Furlong?
I don't know if Andrew can speak or if he's here, but I think we've covered it.
How do you want to handle this, Mr. Markegard? I know we see those other phone numbers.
Mr. Chairman, unfortunately, the software is not allowing me to. I can unmute them. Let's try that. So first, I will unmute a caller from 612 area code. Phone number starts with the numbers 38.
Yeah, that's me. I'm Andrew Dibble.
Oh, good.
Okay.
Good.
Go ahead, Mr. Dibble. Do you have anything else to add?
No, I think Steve did a good job of kind of outlaying what the plan with the lots were. And, we're doing this to make the best use of the land. So I think this is a good way to do it.
Okay. Thank you. And I'm just want to clarify. It's you two are just from the applicant perspective. Did you have anybody else?
We do not.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Any questions from commissioners to the applicant? Oh boy. Okay.
Can you see the hands raised?
I can see him now. Commissioner Albrecht, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is related to the neighborhood meeting that Mr. Furlong had mentioned in his initial proposal regarding affordable housing. My first question is, what was the reception from the neighborhood regarding affordable housing? Why did you decide to go in a different direction? And then a follow-up to that is, what is the general price point of the new house and duplex that you're proposing to build, or is there a range that you're looking at?
Well, Andrew, I can answer the second question. The two-family dwelling, each side, approximate market price would be in the mid 400,000 range. We haven't settled in on the single family yet, but likely somewhere near 800,000. I can answer part of the first question. The reason why we did a neighborhood meeting is anytime you propose changes like this, especially in this neighborhood, it's good to have involvement of the neighbors, as the last thing you want to do is Andrew's living here. He doesn't want to upset his neighbors, and we'd rather start off knowing that we have agreement on what we'd like to propose, and that it's generally acceptable to the neighborhood. And that's what we found. The only adverse response we had was a concern about affordable housing when we were initially discussing two-family dwellings. The thought from I think one of the neighbors was that we were going to be building affordable housing there, and it became apparent that was not desired.
Mr. Chair, if I could just follow up on that.
Go ahead.
What the reluctancy towards affordable housing, do you know from what perspective that was coming from? Did you get a sense of why neighbors were reluctant in that area?
Well, Commissioner Albrecht, it's a slippery slope for me to answer the question here, no pun intended. I think this neighborhood is a more affluent neighborhood in our city, and I feel that they didn't want to change that, if I could be blunt.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Albrecht. Commissioner Roman, you have a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think my question was, I think, answered, but I want to ask it to be clear. Mr. Dibble is the property owner and lives on the property. Is that correct?
Yep, I'm the property owner, and I will live on the property as soon as I'm done with the inside renovations, which should be shortly.
Okay, and your intention is to continue living there?
For the rest of my life, because I'm never moving again.
Thank you. No further questions, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Goldsman, you have a question?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yes, so the question I have for the applicant is really what their intention is with those two new properties. Are they planning on selling them once the development is complete, or are they looking at renting out the units individually to, prospective rental?
Commissioner Goldsman, the two-family dwelling will be built on spec for sale. And our hope is that we can market the single family as a custom to be built for sale product.
Great, thank you.
All right, is there anybody else from the Planning Commission that has questions for the applicant? Going once, twice. All right. With that, I will go ahead and open it up to the public. And my understanding is we do have at least one individual that was that wanted to speak tonight.
Yes, Mr. Chair, Mr. Nathan Reeder is on the phone call. Mr. Reeder, I will unmute you if you want to say a few words. Mr. Reeder, can you hear us?
Is he the other phone number?
No, he shows up as Nathan Reeder.
I want to make sure we have an opportunity for him to speak, so.
Try unmuting the other phone line.
Okay, we can hear somebody in there. Mr. Reeder, can you say a few words? All right, I'm going to try unmuting the other call-in user at a 646 area code.
There we go.
Did that do the trick, Mr. Reeder?
Yeah, this is not Mr. Reeder, sorry.
Okay, just for future reference, are you interested in testifying on item 1 or a future item?
Hey, Glenn.
Just,
Glenn, can you hear me?
just a second, Lundell.
Okay, I have Mr. Reeder on the phone and I'm going to give him directions. He'll be calling in on a phone number.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
thank you. The individual that just spoke, are you interested in testifying on item number 1?
No, sir.
Okay, on a future item?
I'm listening in for some of the variants, item number 4, I believe.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Oh, okay. Item number 3, Kel variances, which is continue. Okay. All right. All right. We'll wait then for Mr. Reeder for just a couple seconds. So if we can take a little bit of a delay here as we work through the technical issues with trying to do a public process online.
So if you're interested, the prevailing setback for the north houses, they average about 41 feet back on the north block. That's just something that I came up with in my own research. It's not official or anything, but they're about 41 feet back each. Some are 36, some are 45.
Thank you.
All right. I'm getting a text that Mr. Reeder is calling in now. Should be a new number popping up.
Okay. Do we have some elevator music while we wait?
Yeah, I need that. You could.
Is that the new one
I
there?
think we should have Mike sing.
All right. It should be coming up momentarily.
And no one wants to hear me sing.
Why don't I, while we wait, I'll go ahead and summarize or, let's see, we have 4 different emails that I see in front of me that came on item number 1. And the first one, they received notice. They live across from the lot. Splitting the lot, 1 lot into 3 lots would be okay with us if they were going to be single-family residents. But they understand that it will be condos, therefore increasing density. They've lived across from the property for 2 years, 2 years of construction and interference in the quiet neighborhood that they enjoy. And they've shared that information with Mr. Dibble. And that was from the residents at 2930 Overlook. Having another email from 2821 West 112th Street. Summarize it. It was okay with them, the variance process. Third email looks like from 2815 Overlook Drive. They've reviewed the city website with regards to the materials and are writing to express concerns about the resulting density that the parcel, if the application would be approved, with a duplex or duplex in a single-family home. They walk extensively in the neighborhood and are concerned that there are not any other duplexes in the neighborhood, and this could be their feeling is it could be a precedent in the neighborhood for larger lots, and they're not in favor. They would support 2 single-family homes. And then the third or final, 4th email, they have comments regarding it. The preliminary and final plat reside at 2810 Overlook Drive and would strongly object to the idea of putting a duplex or any other multifamily dwelling on the lots. Feel strongly that it would alter the character of the neighborhood. Those are the emails. Is Mr. Reader on yet?
Mr. Chair, we did receive 2 additional call-in users. I'm going to unmute the first at area code 952. And the number starts with a 33. Hello, is that you, Mr. Reader? 95233. All right, let me try the other call-in number.
I think Mr. Reader's on my call.
Okay, I can hear you, Londell, on this phone number.
I'm here. Reader, are you there? I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Great. So this is Nathan Reader.
Okay.
I am the neighbor to this lot. I've lived here for 15 years. And we love the neighborhood. It's a great neighborhood. And Mr. Dibble's lot is a beautiful lot. And has been, has been there for many, many years. So putting 2 new lots changes the characteristic of the neighborhood, particularly the south side of Overlook. It would add density that's not really there. Now, as far as I think that's the main concern of people in the neighborhood, is not really about affordable housing or otherwise. It's really just about putting a duplex, right now where there's 1 house having essentially 4, just really changes the characteristic of the neighborhood and the density. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I've got kind of multiple things calling into my phone, maybe related to this meeting. So, I don't know the applicant, have nothing against the applicant. I understand it's their property. But this is literally my backyard. And, we just wanted to retain the characteristic that we have in the neighborhood, where people have yards and, we don't have neighbors right on top of each other. It's a neighborhood where a lot of people from Bloomington walk through, and just maintaining some space between buildings, maintaining the trees, those sorts of things I think are really important for the aesthetic and the value of the neighborhood. I think if you start putting duplexes in, I think it would set a precedent. You've got big lots. If you put a number of duplexes in, or even just dividing these bluff lots up into a lot of smaller lots, I think that really potentially destroys the character of this neighborhood, not just for the people who live here, but for the people who use it recreationally, who ride bikes here, who walk through and with their dogs and their families and that sort of thing.
Okay, Mr. Reader, do you have, is that all, or I just want to make sure I give you enough time here?
The only other thing would just be, I'm not sure that there was really much of a residential meeting. I think if that meeting is what I saw, it was a couple of people around the card table. So I don't know how well attended that was. I would say not well attended by the neighborhood.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, any questions on Mr. Reader's comments? Okay, seeing none. Mr. Markegard, any other phone numbers to?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, we have Mr. DeSanti, Fred DeSanti.
Okay.
And he is unmuted. So Mr.
Reader, if you want to stay on in case you have something else, just let me know.
Mr. DeSanti, did you want to testify on this item? All right. And then I'll do one more chance for call-in user at 95233. And I'm not.
They're unmuted?
Yeah, they're unmuted. I'm not hearing anything from that caller.
Okay.
So I believe that's all the public testimony, unless Mr. Reader has anything else.
My name is Londell.
Go ahead, Londell.
No, thank you.
What was that last comment? Maybe that was a no thank you.
Okay.
Can't tell if that symbol means they're trying to talk and we're not hearing it, or.
I'm getting a text. Oh, Londell says, hang on a second.
Okay.
He's working with Mr. Reader on a conference call here. That's how they patched him in.
415, dial 415.
Let me.
0001.
I'll mute that for a second.
Sure. And we'll wait. Londell will keep, Mr. Pease will keep you updated, I'm assuming, so we'll understand the status of that. This feels much more complicated than 2 weeks ago.
It does. Yeah. All right, let me unmute.
Okay.
Hey, Glenn,
Yeah, we can hear you.
you have a new person calling in about 2 minutes. That 61233 number was the person I had on the call earlier.
Okay.
Well, you should be getting a Dennis Mahalo. He's going to start dialing in. If he's not able to dial in, he'll call me back and I'll do the same thing I did with this last caller.
Okay. Thank you, Londell. Here it is. User 15. So I've just unmuted a
Hello?
new call-in user.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes?
We can hear you.
Who is this?
Thank you. My name's Dennis Mayello. I'm a homeowner in the neighborhood. I've been here about 13, 14 years. I also have a concern about the density impact along the street here. We do have an immense amount of foot traffic through this neighborhood, a lot of dog walkers and that sort of thing. And after looking everything over and looking at the plat and the setback and everything, I think I would be perfectly comfortable with 2 single-family homes in this plan. I think it's a compromise that obviously everyone that lives in the neighborhood would rather just have that open space. But realizing that homeowners have the right to develop their land according to codes, I really can't state that I have strong opposition to the plat as presented. My concern is the twin home in the neighborhood, both from a density standpoint and being out of character with the neighborhood. I guess I feel very strongly about that. It pushes the housing lines out very close to the edges of the property. It effectively makes the frontage there much less, because you're basically putting 3 homes in on that, I guess 230-foot frontage on overlook that we have there, and that starts looking pretty crowded. Plus the trees that'll have to be removed and that as well. So I just wanted to add my 2 cents. The other thing that's bothering me here is that for this meeting and for this approval, it's only the final plat, and the final plat just has the 2 lots, which I don't think a lot of people have a lot of objection to in general. But once this gets approved, the approval process for the duplex is an administrative action. That is the way I understand it, will not have another public review. And I think there's a disconnect there. I feel like these 2 things ought to be joined. If they plan on putting a duplex on there, that should be taken into consideration in approval for the final plat. But the way this process is set up, that's not how it's being done. So I have a concern about that from a process standpoint, and that's really the end of my comments.
It's really important right now. Really important.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate the comments. Any commissioners? I don't see any hands raised at this point. Mr. Markegard, any additional users online?
I do not believe so.
Okay, and I'll give you that minute to check with Mr. Pease and make sure he hasn't got another individual calling into him, or
He says nobody else has contacted him.
okay. All right. With that, is
Mr.
there
Markegard,
Go ahead.
could I add one more comment yet?
Okay, who is speaking?
This is Steve Furlong.
Go ahead, Mr. Furlong.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioners. So just to respond to a few things we heard, city ordinance limits the number of 2-family dwellings within a certain area. So if we built one here, we couldn't build another one 2 blocks down the street. Construction time has been generally about 5 months on these, so it's not a long drawn out process. And I'd want to note that the circle to the east was a bluff lot that was carved up in 1989. And all of those homeowners would not have that opportunity to own a home in Bloomington if that approach wasn't taken. And so we're doing nothing different than what was done in the cul-de-sac just to the east. We did notify all of the owners within a radius. I think it was 500-foot radius last fall with a postcard that had bright red, all caps, bold print that said Overlook Development Meeting. So certainly had notice of that. And I've heard the word duplex a lot. This is not a duplex. It's a two-family dwelling. It's two separate individual homeowners. The only difference between a two-family dwelling and two single-family homes is that they are attached on a zero lot line. That's all I have. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you, Mr. Furlong.
Yeah, and I see Commissioner Goltzman has her hand up with a question.
Commissioner Goltzman, go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. One question that I have is, have we heard anything from the public for the property to the west? And giving you a little bit of information on why I'm asking the question is the property immediately to the west is currently for sale. And that property is being advertised with the ability to divide that lot as well into 3 separate lots. So I wondered if we've heard from the property owner there or the public on the knowledge and just the overall opinion for the lot immediately to the west of this lot here.
I think I can answer that. This is Andrew Dibble.
Go ahead, Mr. Dibble.
It's my understanding from the agent of that property that they have an accepted purchase agreement on it, and the people that are buying it are not buying it to split it up. They're buying it to renovate the existing home, I think. Further, the 3001 Overlook, which is the property to the west, isn't wide enough to meet the 96-foot width requirement of that neighborhood. So even if the particular buyer wanted to split it, they would have to go through a variance process in order to do that. So I understand that he's advertising it, or the agent is advertising it in a certain way, but that way is not likely given the layout of that lot. And from my understanding, the people that are buying it, they have an accepted offer. There's no intention to split the lot. It's more to renovate the home that's there. So that's what I know about 3001 Overlook.
Thank you, Mr. Dibble.
Thank you.
All right, seeing no other questions and no additional online users, just one last check, Mr. Markegard.
Mr. Chair, I see no additional online.
All right.
users.
Is there a motion to close the public hearing from any of
So
the
moved.
planning?
So moved. Commissioner Roman.
Commissioner Roman with the motion. Do I have a second?
Second by Commissioner Bennett.
Commissioner Bennett with a second. Okay, all those in favor say aye, and I'll do a roll call of that. Commissioner Bennett,
Aye.
Commissioner Goodrum,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldsman,
Aye.
Commissioner Corman,
Aye.
Commissioner Roman,
Aye.
Commissioner Albrecht,
Aye.
and aye. That's a unanimous decision. Close the public hearing. All right, discussion, and probably start with, again, putting your hands up for all those commissioners. And I'll look online here to see if anybody has any comments, any discussion. Commissioner Goldsman.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I think we've heard from the applicant as well as the neighborhood and staff. One area that we haven't discussed in length is really around the sidewalk. And I actually use that neighborhood quite a bit, walk my dog. And I would be in favor of waiving the sidewalk construction just for the sake of there is no other sidewalk on that street. It wouldn't make sense to have the lonely sidewalk as well as the removal of all of those trees would be obviously an impact to the neighborhood and aesthetics. So overall, I think the applicant has met all of the requirements, and it looks to see that part of this agreement would be, or this approval would be, for the platting of the 2 lots. And I would be in favor of waiving the sidewalk construction. Overall, I think that this is a good application. I'll be supporting that tonight.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Goldsman. Commissioner Roman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I think that, in alignment with what Commissioner Goldsman mentioned, putting a sidewalk doesn't make sense. However, again, as my drum to beat, here we are rebuilding a street where we have heard from multiple members of the public how busy it is and how much people like to walk, and we are failing to put sidewalks in as we rebuild streets. And so I just think it's a really big mistake on the part of the city, on the planning side of the street segment of our city. And I would like to have that, staff take that back and let them know. As far as the actual application, again, given the parameters of what our ability and our purview as a planning commission, as a planning commission, our job is not to weigh those other issues. Our job is, does it meet the conditions of the code? And it does. And so given that, the ability to subdivide this into 3 separate lots, it does meet those requirements. And so I find myself in support of it because that is the extent of the scope of our role.
Thank you, Commissioner Roman. Are there any other commissioners? Any discussion items? Okay, Commissioner Albrecht?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to echo what Commissioner Roman said about the role of the Planning Commission, and I too will be in support of this project. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And all right, I'll just chime in here as well. I think this is an interesting application before us. Again, the plat subdividing 1 lot into 3, and what will now be potentially in the future, although that has yet to be determined, up to 4 homes. But to everybody else's comments, the application meets the intent of the ordinance for the subdivision, and for that I can support it. Additional to the sidewalk, I would agree with Commissioner Roman that we do a lot of things to promote active transportation in the city of Bloomington, and then we seem to get in the way of our own direction with not putting sidewalks in where they're needed. And so I would just push an additional comment to the city council that as they look at reconstruction of this roadway, that they make provisions for that type of activity on this facility. With that, I don't see any additional comments from Commissioner Bennett.
Yeah, I would just reiterate what most of the commissioners have said, especially regarding our role. I appreciate the comments from the public and the neighbors, but as the other commissioners have said, this does meet the code requirements, and that's basically the purview of our ability to look at it. So unless there are other comments, I would be willing to make a recommendation.
Okay, any other comments?
Seeing none, in case PL 2020-38, I move to recommend the City Council waive the sidewalk construction requirement along Overlook Drive for the final plat for L18.
Okay. Again, we'll do this by roll call. All those in favor say aye. Commissioner Bennett? Made it?
Did we get a second?
Oh, I apologize. Is there a second?
Commissioner Goldsman, second.
Commissioner Goldsman with a second. All right, now on to the voting. All those in favor of the recommendation say aye. We'll go by roll call. Commissioner Bennett? Commissioner Goodrum,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldsman,
Aye.
Commissioner Corman,
Aye.
Commissioner Roman,
Aye.
Commissioner Albrecht,
Aye.
and myself as an aye. That's a unanimous vote. And do we have a second recommendation? Commissioner Bennett.
In case PL 2020-38, having been able to make the required findings, I move to recommend the City Council approve the preliminary plat and adopt a resolution approving the final plat for LA Team, subject to the conditions and code requirements attached to the staff report.
Second, Corman.
Second by Commissioner Corman. And all right, again, roll call vote. Commissioner Bennett,
Aye.
Commissioner Goodrum,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldsman,
Aye.
Commissioner Corman,
Aye.
Commissioner Roman,
Aye.
Commissioner Albrecht.
Aye.
All right, and myself as an aye. That's unanimous vote, 7-0. These two items will go to the April 22nd City Council meeting for final approval. And that's the conclusion of item number 1. On to item number 2, which is the SIC development. And my understanding is do we need a motion to continue this, or was this by the?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, for item 2, the applicant requests a continuance to the May 21st Planning Commission meeting, so we would need a motion on that.
Okay, all right. With that being said, do I have a motion, Commissioner Bennett?
I move to continue the SIC development item case PL 2020-08 to the May 21st, 2020 Planning Commission meeting.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Commissioner Albrecht, second.
I didn't catch that.
Commissioner Albrecht,
Oh,
second,
Commissioner
I believe.
Albrecht. All right, thank you, Commissioner Albrecht, with a second. All right, again, all those in favor say aye by roll call. Commissioner Bennett,
Aye.
Commissioner Goodrum,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldsman,
Aye.
Commissioner Corman,
Aye.
Commissioner Roman,
Aye.
Commissioner Albrecht,
Aye.
and myself as an aye. Item number 2 is continued till the May 21st Planning Commission meeting. All right, item number 3.
Mr. Chairman, and item number 3, the applicant requests continuance to the May 7th Planning Commission meeting.
Okay, all right. Do we have a motion from one of the Planning Commission members?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
this is Commissioner Roman. I move to continue case PTEL 2020-31 to the May 7, 2020 Planning Commission meeting.
All right, we have a motion by Commissioner Roman. Is there a second?
Commissioner Albrecht, second.
Commissioner Albrecht with a second. Again, we'll go through the roll call. All those in favor say aye. Commissioner Bennett,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldsman,
Aye.
Commissioner Goodrum, sorry,
Aye.
Commissioner Corman,
Aye.
Commissioner Roman,
Aye.
Commissioner Albrecht,
Aye.
and myself as an aye. Item number 3, the Kel variance is continued to the May 7th Planning Commission meeting. All right, item number 4. Can we have a staff report?
Sure, Mr. Chairman, Michael Palermo will offer that staff report. I believe you have control, Michael, if you want to start.
And just a second. Yeah. Everyone see the presentation?
Yes,
Yeah,
we can.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Yep.
Okay. Mr. Chair, Commissioners, I'm here tonight to talk about privately initiated sign code amendments. So like I said, it's privately initiated, but it's kind of in relation to what we did in the miscellaneous issues 2019. You remember that in tall office buildings, 7 stories or more, we used to require that signs be in the top 20 feet. of the building. And then in the miscellaneous issues, we changed that to also allow or in the bottom 20 feet of a building, kind of signaling where the entrance of the building is. The proposal is to have an in lieu of your freestanding sign to reallocate that freestanding sign to that wall signage in that lower part of the building, the 20 feet of the building. It would be required that it be the same street frontage as a permitted freestanding sign. Like I said, it would be within the 20 feet of the ground. It would have to also, language says, near the primary building entrance. So the intent is really to signal this is where the entrance of the building is, kind of activate the street. And it's only for tall office buildings. So we have in our sign code a district for tall office buildings, 7 stories or more. You would still need to get a sign permit as normal. That's reviewed by staff to be reviewed for code compliance. The total additional square footage for signage, your freestanding sign, you're allowed up to 100 square feet. So you'd essentially be reallocating that 100 square feet to the wall near an entryway. Staff is in support of this proposal. For one, the total signage is not changing. We're just reallocating that freestanding sign to another location. More of our new office buildings are more urban in design, so they're up to the street. Having that sign by a door it really activates for the pedestrian environment as people are walking by. That sign signals where the entrance is, whereas a sign, in the top 20 feet of a 7-story building is not that noticeable. They're kind of two different audiences. And then in reality, the effect of having that is not much different than what really is permitted with a freestanding sign. You could technically have a freestanding sign that's 6 feet from the wall that would have the same effect as a wall sign, but it's substantially more expensive because you have to put a foundation in, and while it functions the same, it's just an added cost for the property owner. So we don't see that it needs to be in that place. So pretty straightforward sign code amendment. I'm here to answer any questions people would have.
All right, thank you. All right, Mr. Markegard has left me all by myself in the chambers here, so we'll see if we can do this. And he's covered up the list where all the commissioners are, so we're going to try and play this by ear. Are there any questions of the commissioners for staff on this particular item? Seeing none. Is the applicant of this particular item available this evening? And I am struggling here a little bit, so let's see. I'll wait for Mr. Markegard to come back.
I could see on the attendee list there's Matt Swanson, who is the applicant. So let's see. I have the ability to unmute him. We'll see. It does not look like I have that ability.
Okay. All right. Well, it's good you tried. So we'll have that come back. And can you hit the unmute? Oh yes, Mr. Swanson. Did you have any comments? Or did it not go? Mr. Swanson, are you there?
Yes, I am. I don't have anything to add beyond what Mr. Palmero just summarized for us.
All right, thank you. Appreciate that. Do we have Mr. Markegard is back? Thank you. Do we have anybody else on the list here from the public that you're aware of?
So remind me who just spoke.
Mr. Swanson just spoke.
Mr. Swanson. All right. We have Mr. DeSanti. We can check in with him. I'm getting a text.
Okay.
Londell has not received anything.
Okay.
Call-in user 8. I'm going to unmute call-in user 8, who's area code 646.
Did you have any comments?
All right.
All right.
And I do not see anybody else.
Okay. And we didn't have any correspondence on this item at all?
Mr. Palermo, confirm, I don't believe so, but.
No, I haven't received any.
Okay. All right. Seeing that there's no one else in the public comment, is there a recommendation by one of the commissioners to close the public hearing? Commissioner Goldsman.
Propose to close the public hearing.
All right. Is there a second?
Second, Commissioner Roman.
Commissioner Roman with the second. All right. All those in favor say aye by roll call. Commissioner Bennett.
Aye.
Commissioner Goodrum.
Aye.
Commissioner Goldsman.
Aye.
Commissioner Corman.
Aye.
Commissioner Roman.
Aye.
Commissioner Albrecht.
Aye.
All right. Myself as an aye. That's unanimous. The public hearing is closed. All right. Is there any discussion? Not seeing any. Is there anybody that would like to make a motion?
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Thank you. This is Commissioner Roman. In case PL 2020-40, I move to recommend approval of the ordinances attached to the staff report to amend the city code to allow an additional wall sign in lieu of a freestanding sign for office buildings with 7 stories or more, thereby amending Chapter 19 of the city code.
All right. Is there a second?
Second, Corman.
Commissioner Corman with the second. All those in favor say aye by roll call. Commissioner Bennett.
Aye.
Commissioner Goodrum.
Aye.
Commissioner Goldsman.
Aye.
Commissioner Corman.
Aye.
Commissioner Roman.
Aye.
Commissioner Albrecht.
Aye.
And myself as an aye. That's 7-0, unanimous vote. All right, this item will move to the May 4th City Council meeting for final approval. And on to item number 5 tonight, U-Haul of Southern Minnesota. Is there a staff update on this particular item?
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Johnson.
Thanks, Glenn. Good evening, members of the Planning Commission. I do have a PowerPoint presentation for you. Glenn, do I have the controls?
You do have.
Okay. Can you guys see that? Okay.
Yes, we can.
Okay, so this is an item that was continued from your last meeting on March the 19th. This is a conditional use permit and final site and building plans, final decision for a 4-story self-storage facility at 8901 Lindale Avenue South and 515 Halsey Lane.
So Mr. Johnson, the viewing is not in the full screen mode.
Oh, I'm sorry. 1 second. How about now?
That looks good.
Okay, sorry about that. So yes, this is a continued application, a self-storage facility. It was submitted by U-Haul of Southern Minnesota. So just to reiterate, there was a number of outstanding conditions and areas of non-compliance that the Planning Commission wanted to see further study on and some revised plans and additional design work done. So U-Haul of Minnesota and their design team did submit revised plans addressing all of these specific comments of the Planning Commission. And so what staff put together to respond and review those revised plans is they did issue a supplemental memo to the Planning Commission going over all those specific questions and requests for updates. So hopefully you had that, and hopefully it was fairly straightforward. That being said, what we'll do here in this PowerPoint slide is identify what the specific updates are that are encapsulated in the revised plans, and also discuss how they impact the recommended conditions of approval by staff. Okay, just to reorient you to the site. Again, this is the industrial portion of the Lindale Avenue corridor, just to the north of 90th Street. There were some industrial uses at these sites. They've since been demoed. You can see the two properties outlined in yellow. So this is the revised site plan that U-Haul has submitted. And so what I'll do here is go over specific issues that were raised by the Planning Commission on March 19th and relate how they affect conditions of approval. So the updates that were submitted by U-Haul are identified in yellow highlight. Hopefully you can see those. So just going through those, previously the recreational vehicle outdoor storage area was insufficient in size, did not meet code. So they were able to increase that to a code complying area or size. So you see that area highlighted. As such, staff has removed that as a recommended condition of approval. Another element of the review of the site plan found that there was 2 parking islands that were not provided adjacent to the RV storage area. So those are both highlighted in yellow and are now provided in a code complying size. And the other 2 parking islands that you see southeast of the building were insufficient size, did not meet code. And so those have also been increased to a code compliant size. So as such, the condition pertaining to the city engineer's review of parking, access, and circulation plans has been amended to remove that specific reference to code complying parking islands. Another issue that was updated in the revised site plan was the provision of a sidewalk along Halsey Lane. This was not a specific element that was requested by the Planning Commission, but the design team did address other elements of the staff comments with their revised plans. So they are now showing a code complying sidewalk along Halsey Lane. Just a small little box here. This was not addressed in the staff memo, but they also did provide bike racks. The recommended condition of approval still remains in place because the city engineer has to review the quantity before accepting it, but they did provide a bike rack meeting the engineer's request in terms of providing that feature. Just circling back to the Halsey Lane sidewalk, that condition, recommended condition of approval, was also removed from the recommended list of conditions in the memo. Getting to the request regarding building materials and the elevation plans, I just want to get to the revised architectural plans that they provided. So there's some elements that have changed since the previous meeting. So first and foremost, the Planning Commission requested that first floor windows on the Lindale Avenue west elevation be provided all along the first floor of the building in order to provide enhanced street presence and safety and security for the facility along Lindale Avenue there. So you can see that on the western elevation, they are providing windows continuously along the first floor. On the north side of the facility in the western elevation, that's that retail area. If I need to go back to the floor plan, I certainly can pull that up too. But if you recall, that's that retail area where they do sell moving supplies and other incidental retail activity. And then on the south side, that is a travel corridor similar to the other levels of the facility. That is a travel corridor serving individual self-storage units. In terms of other changes that were made, submitted by the architect, they did change out some of the exterior building materials. They previously were showing small sections of stone veneer and thin brick in some areas. These were removed in favor of a uniform precast concrete, which is a code complying material in the industrial zoning districts. So I just want to raise that. But as such, the materials do meet code. Staff did remove that condition as well from the revised list of recommended conditions. Getting to updates to the landscape plan, there's a number of updates made to that plan to make it code complying as well. They did add parking island trees to this larger island in front of the facility, as well as the new islands that border the RV storage area. So you can see those trees highlighted. Another issue that was raised had to do with the screening of surface parking within 40 feet of a public street. So you can see here where my cursor is, the highlight that shrubs were added to screen those vehicles in this north-south parking tier east of the building. On the west side of the site, there was some comments that pertained to foundation plantings at the building, as well as providing additional separation along the Lindale Avenue sidewalk, which is heavily traveled. So they did provide those foundation plantings along the western building elevation. They did space out some of the evergreens in order to get better visibility in those windows that were requested by the Planning Commission. So there were some adjustments with those plants as well. This area highlighted here, previously there was some trees located in this bed, which is nice, but as the tree grows, trees that are very close to public sidewalks tend to be maintenance issues for the city in terms of trimming as those branches continue to grow. So we did have them remove trees that were in too close a proximity to the public sidewalk as well. And uniformly, it's not highlighted on the plan, but if you recall, there was one tree located in the public right-of-way and other landscape material within public easements elsewhere on the plan. So all that material has been moved out. Some of the material is in close proximity, but none of the trees and shrubs are now located in the public right-of-way or public easements of record. So just to note in terms of how this impacts the proposed condition, the condition, it was revised only to require the landscape surety, which is a financial security that the city requires to ensure the health of the material for one full growing season after it is planted. So that's what's reflected in the revised condition. Just a note about some other changes that came in with the proposed facility as they were moving things around on the architectural floor plans as it pertained to looking at the materials and other things. They did shrink the retail sales area and increase the overall number of storage units. I think they adjusted some of the sizes of some of the units as well. And what that resulted in was an increase in the number of storage units from 868 to 903. The only practical impact that has on the site and other plan review is as it pertains to off-street parking. And by shrinking the retail area and increasing the number of storage units, that parking requirement actually came down. And the reason for that is that retail is the highest driver of parking in our city ordinance. So just to note that the site is still in compliance with the parking requirements. This is just a revised analysis for the record. So some other miscellaneous issues and updates that came up at the meeting. There was a request to give an update on where the project stands with their stormwater management review at the 9 Mile Creek Watershed District. The applicant was able to provide a letter of conditional approval from 9 Mile Creek that was included in the packet. And so when a project has conditional approval, the outstanding items remaining are providing performance bonds and entering into maintenance agreements. There's some other miscellaneous things. But what that is an indication of is that the project and the stormwater management proposed is going to substantially comply with their requirements, and they are on track to secure their full watershed district permit. Facility lighting was another topic of conversation. The previous reviews of self-storage facilities solicited that, for when these facilities face residential uses, whether abutting or across the street, it is a good standard to limit the corridor and kind of display windows lighting during the nighttime hours. U-Haul came back with their revised project description offering to extinguish those lights with exception of safety and security lighting between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. So we're certainly encouraged by that. And we did include a condition of approval that does pertain to the lighting. Next issue, there was some discussion at the meeting and certainly some back and forth between staff and the applicant about the specific language as it pertains to what types of activities are allowed that are associated with the truck rental facility that U-Haul operates across the street. I'm happy to report that that through some additional work and discussion, staff and the applicant came to an agreement on some language that satisfies both parties' interests in that regard. And so you do see a revised condition language that really limits the use of the truck rental facility to office and only incidental, kind of rare activities only. That the parking and storage of rental trucks at this site is not permitted and needs to be corrected in a certain amount of time should that occur. So that is that condition language. If need be, I can pull up the specific language. One thing I forgot a bullet on is that they also submitted their MPCA no permit declaration. So that condition was also removed from the revised list of conditions. But with all these changes, I hope it wasn't too confusing, but hopefully the staff memo spelled it out that when we were describing these conditions and discussion topics, we were referencing the previous staff report, just for reference. As a result of a lot of these changes I've talked about, the revised list of recommended conditions has been renumbered. So unfortunately, it doesn't translate condition to condition to the exact number that you were looking at before. But that being said, all the items that we talked about should be properly reflected in the revised list of conditions. So staff is still recommending approval on this project. They did substantial work to address a number of the items raised by the Planning Commission. We do have two recommended motions for you. I do have some extra slides with the conditions and other things should that arise. Otherwise, I can stand for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Are there any questions of staff from Planning Commission members? Commissioner Goldsman.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Mr. Johnson, I have a question. One of the things that I can't remember us talking about or seeing in your slide deck is around signage. Have they submitted a plan for signage, and what does that look like? Does it meet city code, et cetera?
Yeah, Acting Chair Solberg, Commissioner Goldsman, they have not submitted any plans for signage. We're still including a recommendation that, like any development, they have to meet the city code for signs. This property is in the I3 zoning district, so they are subject to the Class 4 sign district standards, which would allow wall signs and freestanding signs at specific setbacks and sizes and those types of things. So it's kind of status quo on that front. They're required to meet code, and they haven't documented any future plans as it pertains to signage to the state.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions for staff from Planning Commission members? All right, that being said, at this point, we did close the public hearing last time we heard this subject. So at this point, I would be looking for a motion from one of the Planning Commission members to reopen the public hearing. Do I have a motion?
So moved, Commissioner Roman.
Commissioner Roman with the motion. Do I have a second?
Second, Commissioner Goldsman.
Commissioner Goldsman with a second. All right. All those in favor say aye by roll call. Commissioner Bennett.
Aye.
Commissioner Goodrum.
Aye.
Commissioner Goldsman.
Aye.
Commissioner Corman.
Aye.
Commissioner Roman.
Aye.
Commissioner Elbert.
Aye.
And myself as an aye. The Planning Commission has reopened the public hearing. All right, Mr. Markergard, do we have the applicant or any other members of the public online?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, in terms of the applicant, we have Mr. Christopher Bowman. on the call and a Mr. Ryan Anderson. And both of you are able to unmute yourself if you would like to speak. I am going to unmute Mr. Bowman and check in here. Mr. Bowman, can you hear us?
Yeah, I sure can.
Did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I think we tried in good faith to answer all the questions that the commission laid in front of us, and we made some changes quickly, and I guess that stands on its own.
Okay. Do you know if Mr. Anderson has anything to add? Your engineer?
He'd be here just if you guys had any questions.
Okay. Thank you. Any commission members have questions for the applicant? Commissioner Albrecht.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just noticed in the change in the language regarding the use of the property, which was condition number 26, that the revised language eliminated the word pickup of rental trucks and trailers. I wonder, it says parking, storage, etc. Is there a reason why pickup was eliminated from that? And is there a plan to use the site for pickups of rentals?
Mr. Bowman?
All pickups would happen on the other site, but it does leave us the ability to, let's say we pull up a truck for a handicapped person or somebody that would be unable to migrate across to the other site, or it gives us the opportunity to help the exception, not the rule, and then, we spelt out in there, and if somebody were to accidentally drop the truck off on the wrong site, we got some time to move it over to the other site. So there's going to be no parking, so there would be no picking up of equipment on this particular site. So.
Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Goodrum? You're on mute. Looks like we're playing tag here back and forth. Go ahead, Commissioner Goodrum.
I just want to follow up on during the staff report, the removal of the brick veneer. I don't have a copy of the previous one. Where was that previously approved, and maybe a comment on why it was removed?
We looked at the brick veneer is very, very expensive, and when we had looked at the cost of adding the additional windows on Lindale, we had to make some changes, and then we have to be, fiscally responsible in the buildings that we build. And we always have a budget that we have to stay to, and this was just the compromise in that. But we did add a lot of the colors, and the building actually has a little bit more definition now because we did add different colors on different sections to kind of break up the building as where it juts out, or it has relief in the building.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Are there any further questions for the applicant? Seeing none, Mr. Markegard, anybody else on the online that?
Mr. Chair, everybody else on the attendee list are staff members.
Okay.
We did receive one curiosity call from a neighbor who was watching. Called Mr. Pease just to find out, but kind of how the testimony worked, but decided he did not want to testify.
Okay.
So, just nice to know that people are watching and calling in.
Yeah.
Glenn and John, just for the record, I haven't received any follow-up correspondence in written form regarding this item since the March 19th meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. All right, seeing no other public comment, do I have a motion? Can I have a motion by the Planning Commission to close the public hearing?
So moved, Commissioner Roman.
Commissioner Roman with the motion. Do I have a second?
Second, Commissioner Goldsman.
Commissioner Goldsman with a second. All right. Motion to close public hearing. All those in favor say aye by roll call. Commissioner Bennett,
Aye.
Commissioner Goodrum,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldsman,
Aye.
Commissioner Corman,
Aye.
Commissioner Roman,
Aye.
Commissioner Albrecht,
Aye.
and myself as an aye. That's a unanimous vote, 7-0. Close the public hearing. All right, any discussion on the item? Commissioner Goodrum.
Thanks, Acting Chair. I want to thank staff and the applicant for pulling this together on the short notice. There was at my last meeting, a number of items that were unfinished and had questions on that. Being the final review of this type of extensive project, to make sure that we're approving something that we're well aware of what's being approved. I think by looking at what I saw so far, that the changes that were made it more code compliant. The building materials, I knew it'd be some type of compromise, but I'll stop my comments here and listen to what the rest of the commission have to say.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Goodrum. Commissioner Roman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will echo Commissioner Goodrum's comments. I think this is a much improved application. I'm appreciative of the applicant hearing the concerns the commission raised. I'm glad that the staff was able to modify some of the language to address some of the concerns that the applicant had. It looks like the parking thing that they would like a little bit more clarity on, we were able to provide. It looks like in this process they are even increasing their storage capacity by 4%. So hopefully that's a positive for them. I did look back at the previous design, and from what I can tell, it looks like where we've lost the thin brick is where we've gained the windows. And so for me, I will take that as a plus. And I think the other requirements about the lighting, I'm glad that we are attentive to that, even though code doesn't treat multifamily the way it treats single family in this situation. So for those reasons, I am ready to support this if others are.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Roman. Are there other discussion by the commission members? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion. Oh, Commissioner Goldsman, do you have another comment?
Thanks, Acting Chair. Just wanted to comment to the addition of the windows as well as the landscaping, I feel really help the walkability of the neighborhood. You know, with the redevelopment of Lindale Avenue really being walkable to the street, and streetscaping is really going to be important. So I appreciate the addition, and I think it's a lot more welcoming now that those elements have been added.
Thank you, Commissioner Goldsman. All right. Again, do I have a motion? Is there a motion? Commissioner Goodrum.
Thanks, Acting Chair. Yes, I'll make the motion. So in case number PL 20220-26, having been able to make the required findings, I move to adopt a resolution approving a conditional use permit for a 4-story, 903-unit self-storage facility located at 8901 Lindale Avenue South and 515 Halsey Lane, subject to the conditions and code requirements listed in the revised resolution.
We have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second, Commissioner Albrecht.
Commissioner Albrecht with a second. All those in favor say aye by roll call. Commissioner Bennett.
Aye.
Commissioner Goodrum.
Aye.
Commissioner Goldsman.
Aye.
Commissioner Corman.
Aye.
Commissioner Roman.
Aye.
Commissioner Albrecht.
Aye.
All right, and myself as an aye. That's 7-0 unanimous vote. That is a final decision unless an appeal is received by 4:30 p.m. on April 14th, 2020. On to our last agenda item, which would be to approve the minutes of the March 19th Planning Commission. Is there a motion?
So moved. Commissioner Roman.
Commissioner Roman, motion to
Second.
and a second by Commissioner Goodrum. All those in favor say aye by roll call. Commissioner Bennett,
Aye.
Commissioner Goodrum,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldsman,
Aye.
Commissioner Corman,
Aye.
Commissioner Roman,
Aye.
Commissioner Albrecht.
Aye.
All right, and myself as an aye. That's a 7-0 unanimous vote to approve the Planning Commission minutes of March 19th, and that ends our April 9th, 2020 Virtual Planning Commission. Thank you.